Erasure mechanics, two big ones. First, disease collapse removes crews who remember which notch to clear in which month. Second, colonial grids preferred neat plazas and stone. Jurisdiction got redrawn along rivers and missions, not canals and soils. A century later, the maintenance culture is gone, but the system's ghost still runs during storms. Camp by a wild pond and wake to a flood that politely avoided the flat beside you. You just slept next to an old algorithm. Replication outside headlines seals it. In secondary blocks, you still see the trio: causeway spines, platform clusters, and waterwork lattices. Even where modern pastures slice the pattern, berm fragments and pond lips reappear at expected intervals. Persistence turns looks like a city into is a city we can audit. A micro story. After a storm, a rancher messaged, "The pasture flooded everywhere except a weird zigzag near the tree line." We layered old LIDAR. That zigzag was a terrace edge with 3 spill notches. He'd been mowing over hydrology older than his fence posts. Once he left a 2-meter strip unmown, his dry season water held longer. That's an ecosystem behaving like infrastructure. So when your base map says uninhabited, but your scans say rules, trust the rules. The canopy hides architecture, the water remembers plans, the soil records votes taken in charcoal. Learn what causeways, canals, and platform mounds look like together, and you'll start seeing cities under leaves wherever the map still claims there's nothing there. 3. Sahara's memory, the eye and its neighbors. Now we leave canopy ghosts for a desert that remembers water. Most people see dunes and emptiness. Satellites see shorelines, rivers, and grids that wake a few weeks a year. Read the Sahara in seasonal windows and it starts talking. Headline first, the Richat structure, the eye. Geology says uplifted dome eroded into rings. Fair, but the geometric shock is real, near concentric terraces, radials, and ledge steps that look too neat for chaos. The trap is leaping to lost empires. The smarter move is asking why humans kept aiming stories at it. Rings act like natural wayfinding. Steps hold puddled water. If you roamed caravans, terraces, not walls, were anchors. Zoom out. Radar mapped paleolakes across Mauritania, Mali, Niger, Chad. The receipts are shorelines. Benches curving at consistent height bands, beach ridge threads only waves make. Overlay fossil riverbeds and the Tamanrasset River pops, a drowned trunk channel that once ran west under dunes to the Atlantic shelf. This wasn't empty land. It was a rotating network of green corridors pulsing with monsoon shifts. Add deltas, rock pools tucked in canyon bends. They're time capsules. Some kept relict fish, even crocodiles until recently. Their coordinates line up with caravan stop points and star route lore. Before magnetic compasses, traders navigated by sky and water memory. Stars set bearings, dependable pools set options. That's why oases map to stories. It isn't romance, it's logistics. Sand-buried alignments are the hardest receipts. You won't catch them at noon in a single image. You catch them when low sun slants after a calm scene or in a wet spring when shrubs pulse greener in strips. Then stone ribs, low walls, berms, pens blink through. The audit is time-based. Revisit, confirm, compare angles. If segments reappear with matched spacings and orientations, you're not seeing yardage. You're seeing a grid breathing under dunes. A clean example, northern Mauritania, a set of parallels appears after a wind event. 4, then 6, then 4 again, each offset a consistent angle from prevailing drift. Sample distances, gaps cluster, that's a yard. Whether it's staged animals, caravans, or fields in a wetter century, rhythm says planning. Stack with nearby shoreline terraces and its function next to water. Cartography ignores it because maps love surface certainty. Subsurface moisture lines don't announce themselves until a shower paints them green. Base maps privilege crisp coasts and roads. The inland grid fuzzes because it's seasonal, subtle, and boring. Boredom hides value. Star-aligned trade nodes deserve another pass. Correlate deltas and hilltops signal points with ethnographic path memory, and bearing offsets recur. Night arcs moving caravans between water while skirting sand seas. Alignments to Polaris or seasonal risings weren't temples, they were insurance. Stones on ridges could be shrine and sign, dual use gets maintained. Time for a false ending. Every year someone circles repeating lines and calls it a city under dunes. Not yet. A city is system stacked, habitation, storage, waterworks, movement, leaving maintenance affordances. A set of walls without spill notches, pond lips, and access cuts is a maybe. The grid exists, the proof is in the affordances. You want trap boxes for silt at channel turns, berm breaks scaled to head, reuse scars where stones were robbed and reset. When those show together, call me. Honest reading, then audit. Context, replication, scars. Context, Paleolake terraces and fossil channels nearby. Replication, alignments reappearing after different wind seasons with matched spacing within error. Scars, stone borrow pits, stepped ramps up terrace faces, wind-shadowed buildup on the lee of old walls that tells how long a line stood before it fell. If ergonomics fit, ramps sized for backs and beasts, you've left the mirage zone. A micro story. A herder sent a photo of a weird rectangle clearing after a dust storm. We overlaid old radar. It sat on a paleo shoreline shoulder beside a faint cut feeding a dry basin. 2 notches in the rectangle's low wall matched flow lines. That's a weir, not a house. First notch takes normal surge, second catches rare pulse, laying silt where you want it, not in sleeping pens. A week later, wind buried it again. Proof here is seasonal, patience is method. Back to the eye, read it as beacon, not blueprint. Terrace rings concentrate story and travel. Radials act like spokes between catchments. In rain years, water sits on steps. In dry years, steps memorize routes. That's why legends keep orbiting. The geometry is useful even when the lake is gone. Practical tests from your desk. Stack shuttle radar topography with paleohydrology models and Sentinel seasonal NDVI. Do green pulses trace old channels after storms? Do benches plot at discrete hypsometric bands? Cross-check with wind events. Does the same rib pattern reappear? Then hunt affordances, ramp scars, notch pairs, borrow pits. If 3 lines agree, you're out of speculation. One last tell, star route bearings embedded in place names. Chains of toponyms separated by a comfortable day's walk tend to drift by a few degrees in consistent ways, accounting for dunes, crosswinds, and safe approaches to deltas. Language keeps vectors when stones sleep. So no, not a lost city under every dune. Something tougher, a buried syllabus, terraces as calendars, deltas as clock ticks, fossil rivers as roads that went quiet. The Sahara didn't forget. It filed the receipts under sand and made you earn them with light, timing, and a second look after the wind. 4. Lost littorals, coasts that move. Everything shifts when you accept the shoreline as a traveling line, not a boundary. Since the last glacial low, sea level rose more than 100 meters. Ports, fields, and neighborhoods didn't vanish. They stepped seaward until water took the step back. Today's crisp coastlines are the end of the story. The busiest chapters are offshore under silt. Start with the North Sea shelf, Doggerland. This wasn't a rumor, it was country. Sonar and sub-bottom profiles mapped river braids, levees, peat beds. The harbor fingerprints show up as shapes currents don't make on their own. Long, low ridges throwing, mole shadows in bathymetry, curved tongues of coarser sediment where a breakwater would have redirected flow, and silt fans piling in predictable arcs behind a shield. Stack that geometry with dredged finds, worked timbers, fish weirs, antler tools, and you're reading a drowned economy, not a campsite. Slide to the Black Sea. 2 receipts matter. First, drowned terraces and beach ridges at consistent depths, layered like growth rings. Waves sculpt those, not storms. Second, delta lobes with preserved distributary patterns beyond the modern coast. Run GPS-tied sonar across those lobes and channels reappear as low-relief grooves that vanish under younger silt. Cities loved deltas. Deltas migrate. The shelf still holds the street plan logic. Harbors at convex shoulders, storage up layer from flood, causeways perched on natural levees. Sunderland is the shock if you haven't met it yet. Lower sea levels tied Borneo, Java, and the Malay Peninsula into a subcontinental plain. Cores from the South China Sea shelf pull peat, root casts, and freshwater mollusks at depths matching paleo shorelines. That's not open ocean ecology. That's land that breathed and burned. If you want a nursery for coastal societies erased by water and modern maps, it's right there. The audit trick is learning to read harbor without walls. Look for 3, breakwater logic, silt tongues, and backscatter anomalies. Breakwaters rarely face the dominant swell head-on. They set oblique angles with an elbow to create calm. On sonar, that's a ridge with a leeward shadow of fine deposit. Silt tongues taper like comets, thick near shelter, thinning down current. Backscatter anomalies, patches that return a different acoustic texture, often flag timbers, blocks, or artifact lenses trapped by that geometry. You don't need to see a keystone to know a harbor lived there. You only need to see how water was made to behave. Why forbidden? Because access follows money and insurance. Modern seabed maps are needle-sharp along shipping lanes, pipelines, cables, and hazard zones. Archaeology-grade resolution is expensive and rarely public. Insurers care about obstructions and slope stability, not Roman quay steps. The result is a public grid where transit corridors look like MRI scans and the adjacent shelf is mush. Boredom hides value again. Now a desk audit you can run. Context: overlay sea level curves with shelf slope and paleo shorelines. Where benches align with drowned deltas, expect ports. Replication: cross-check multiple bathymetric datasets or revisit with different sonar frequencies. The same ridge-shadow pair should recur. Scars: find dredge scars, mooring blocks, anchor grooves. Those cut into substrate and don't read like natural ripples. If all three agree, you're out of speculation. A micro story. A recreational skipper sent a depth track, a steady rise, then a sudden drop over a kilometer run off an English estuary, plus a patch of odd calm on windy days. We laid it over charts and historical shoreline reconstructions. The rise was a drowned spit, the drop, an old harbor cut. The calm patch sat behind a submerged elbow, breakwater logic still working centuries later. He'd been idling over a ghost port, letting its hydrology save him fuel. Mediterranean shelves are equally talkative. Off the Levant, sonar catches linear moles mirrored by silt-lee shadows. Divers find anchor grooves shaved into limestone ledges at diver depth, mooring logic without monuments. In the Adriatic, subtle bowls in backscatter tile into basins that trap timbers. Sediment cores pull resin traces where shipyards once pitched hulls. The receipts are quiet, but they rhyme. Why haven't we raised a city? Wrong tool, wrong substrate. Stone survives, but most literal engineering lived in earth, wood, and dredged water. The strongest receipts are geomorphic and industrial. Calm made to order, sediment parked on command, currents bullet into service. Think flows, not facades. One more reality: coastlines are legal ledgers. Boundaries, fishing rights, and development hinge on where land is. Admitting that the real city sits 10 to 60 meters out would rewrite jurisdictions. Easier to let the map hold still and let the shelf keep its archives. So here's the rule. If your app shows a coastline in HD but the adjacent shelf is fuzzy, assume choice, not physics. Drowned coasts aren't blank, they're busy. Ports walked with sea level. The map didn't. Read benches as timelines, tongues as signatures, and shadows as testimony. The past didn't disappear, it changed depth. 5. The Alpine Blackouts, fenced peaks and quiet labs. From drowned coasts to high ridgelines, now watch how mountains hide work in plain sight. Elevation looks open on a map. In reality, visibility becomes camouflage. Here's the pattern if you hike enough valleys. A gate at a narrow choke point. A laminated sign, closed for weather. Blue sky above, empty zigzag road beyond. 2 kilometers upslope, antennas, oddly spaced boxes, a clipped pad on a shoulder. Public registries say geophysics array. Fair, arrays listen for microseisms, crustal tilt, infrasound, magnetotellurics. But once you need quiet, you start buying quiet. Access restrictions, timed closures, and maintenance windows that sync suspiciously well with data runs. People chalk it up to snow, sometimes it is. More often it's noise. You can't calibrate a tilt meter while trucks grind switchbacks. So valleys become temporary laboratories. The map reads open. The corridor is. The tunnels never map fully. Mountain infrastructure is honest about intakes, portals, and galleries. What's harder to see are the interconnects. Cross-pass galleries linking hydro, rail, and service shafts under ridges. You read them from surface tells, utility hatch covers at measured intervals, fresh tarmac patches where no storm demanded one, and snow melt stripes. Long, warm bands where buried lines bleed heat. Public PDFs end at a portal. The floor plan keeps going under a contour. Glacier caves complicated. Scientists do go in, ice records everything. In stable systems, you'll find cordon zones, cables, data loggers. The recurring oddity, thermal seams that ignore simple gradients. Subglacial pressurized melt or tiny geothermal sips carve microclimates labs love and fences appear. Officially for safety, practically also to preserve signal. Mineral belts bring neat rectangular, no data grids on survey maps. Reasons can be mundane, landowner refusals, snow cover. They can also be dual use. Exploration that prefers to whisper until leases settle, paired with environmental monitoring sensitive to crowds. The cartographic effect is a tidy hole exactly where your eye stops. Before conspiracy, check seasonality and procurement cycles. If the gap reappears winter and summer and sits beside brand new access work, you're looking at a corridor under negotiation. Here's how weather becomes a curtain. Wind shear at saddles flips on and off with thermal systems you can't see from a trail. Rockfall hazard spikes after freeze, thaw runs. A closure can be correct. But schedule enough of them in the same 2-hour window again and again, and you've purchased perfect quiet when an array needs deep listening or a tunnel crew needs a clear blast slate. The sign says cloud. The calendar says cadence. Audit steps from your phone. Context. Stack closure notices, seismic microseism networks, and utility filings. Do closures cluster near borehole strain meters, magnetote alluric stations, or infrasound lines? Replication. Do hiking forums and ski patrol logs report weather with sun photos while helicopters sling loads past the same saddle? Scars. New rock bolts at gallery mouths. Berm drainage refreshed at choke points. Repeat rotor wash signatures in snow. If cadence and scars line up, the quiet is paid for on purpose. Tunnel logic leaves ergonomic fingerprints. Switchbacks widen at predictable intervals for 2 truck passes. Spoil piles feather at angles of repose that match fresh rock, not talus. Access tracks carry crush patterns distinct from farm rigs, chain chevrons, not smooth arcs. In snow, drifts upstream of a newly cut culvert are shorter. A sharp lip tightens the wake. Micro-reading tells you how recent a cut is, even if the gate is closed. Why fence a peak for science? Because mountains amplify signal and risk at once. Tiny tilt becomes meaningful under glacier load. Electric fields whisper while storms build. Cosmic ray and muon want elevation for flux and isolation for clarity. Once a ridge proves itself, you protect it like a port protects a channel. Timed passages, noise dredging, a pilot who says, "Not today," when the window isn't right. A quick micro story. A hut-to-hut traverse posted closed for weather 08001400. Forecast, clear, avalanche low. In that window, 2 Chinooks ran slings over the ridge. Next day, a geophysics page noted routine maintenance. Sinister, number logistics wrapped in 1 syllable. But to the public, weather is a full stop. Thermal anomalies around huts and stations are noisy by design. Diesel, kitchens, buried pipes. If you're reading the mountain, subtract human heat. Infrared can't tell intent, it can tell plumbing. Pipe logic is simple, straight where geology allows, elbow where stress demands, inspection vaults every N meters. Map and remove it. Leftover warm seams reveal gravity water routes, subnivean channels, springs, slow percolation along faults. Those seams explain why some research only pads land where they do. Not mystery, stable footing, reliable melt. Signal protection culture bleeds into mapping. Airspace NOTAMs blink on for training, then off, exactly when arrays schedule quiet runs. Trail apps show seasonal closure polygons that expand just enough to cover a line of vault lids. Satellite base maps lag refresh in uninteresting scree. The scissors aren't redactions, they're thresholds. Desk test you can run tonight. Pull public seismic noise plots for a ridge, note daily minima. Cross-check with park gate logs and hut supply flights. If minima align with repeated weather, you found the cadence. Then scan recent snow imagery for linear melts and helicopter snow ghosts. Add a procurement calendar begging for low-noise windows. 3 lines agreeing beats rumor. Last tell language drift. Notices start as maintenance, shift to operational safety, then settle on weather. The noun softens pushback, but the schedule keeps its edge. Read fences as filters, closures as valves, warm stripes as plumbing, and weather as the stamp that buys silence. Mountains aren't hiding secret cities. They're running quiet labs in corridors the map pretends are empty. Once you hear the cadence, the blackout isn't a mystery. It's a metronome. 6. Underground voids. Muons, myths, and missing floor plans. But here's where it gets interesting. Once you learn to read ice, jungle, dunes, and ridgelines, the ground under cities starts acting the same way. Rules hiding in noise, corridors under corridors, floor plans that survived as negative space. Start with the quiet X-ray we didn't know we had, muons. Cosmic rays hit the atmosphere, make muons, and those particles pass through stone like ghosts with a stopwatch. Detectors count what gets through. Less flux means more mass, more flux means a void. In 2024-2025, arrays tightened the picture in monuments everyone swore we'd already mapped. The Great Pyramid. The narrow north face corridor behind the chevrons confirmed, plus that stubborn big void above the Grand Gallery. Engineers argue purpose, weight relief versus internal architecture, but the receipt is solid. Non-invasive imaging reading volume where chisel and rumor can't. Don't romanticize it. Muography isn't comic book vision, it's patient statistics. Multiple stations, long exposures, cross-checked with ground-penetrating radar, thermal, and endoscopes where a hair-thin hole won't ruin history. When 3 tools rhyme, you treat the cavity as real. When one whispers alone, it's a maybe. Our rule holds: context, replication, scars. Function over treasure. Corridor-like voids near high-stress zones behave like engineered lungs, spaces that tune load paths or staging galleries left by builders. Ritual readings aren't wrong, they're often dual use. A space can carry story and stress at once. The point is, the floor plan we teach is incomplete and the stone keeps reminding us politely. Zoom under living cities. Istanbul is a postcard up top and a mesh below. Byzantine cisterns, Roman conduits, Ottoman repairs, layers of water logic rerouted for each era. LIDAR won't help underground. You need GPR transects, microgravity, and the oldest tool of all, the sinkhole map. Where voids migrate, the street eventually tells on itself. A sudden depression along a predictable run, usually a collapsed vault, not a myth. Plot enough of them, and the old drainage grid reappears like veins. Naples is the cleanest syllabus. Tufa bedrock cut for quarries, then turned into cisterns, then sealed, then reopened as bomb shelters. Tunnels run beneath palace blocks with air shafts disguised as courtyard wells. GPR lights the near surface. Deeper microgravity picks up density lows where air replaces rock. Maintenance affordances, the square niche, the brick arch at shoulder height, the limewash tide line, tell you what the void was for and how often it was serviced. If a passage lacks shoulder polish and step where it's not a street, it's a drain or a once-a-year access. Mexico City stacks canals, causeways, and buried basalt. Metro digs keep finding Tenochtitlan in cross-section. Levees turn foundations, ritual platforms under parking lots, conduit stubs swallowed by fill. The pattern repeats. Infrastructure learns from the previous century even when paperwork pretends the line is new. A modern sewer follows a colonial ditch that followed a lake-edge berm that followed an island causeway. Miss the void, and your tunnel discovers it with interest. Kola's lesson, scaled to city depth. Underground, heat, gas, and pressure write the rules. Those screams at 12 kilometers were stress waves and electronics amplifying what rock does under load. In cities, the myth is quieter but similar. My GPR saw a chamber the size of a pool under this plaza. Maybe. Or it saw signal loss from saturated fill, old utility trenches, or reinforcement mesh. That's why replication matters. Perpendicular passes, dual frequencies, and a different season for moisture. Only the stubborn anomaly is worth a headline. Sinkholes are constellations. One collapse is bad luck. 10 along a curve mark a forgotten artery. Map them against archival plans and missing floor plans snap into place, rooms left blank on purpose. Bureaucracies hate uncertainty. They fill it with hatching. The ground refuses neat diagonals and keeps whispering, "There was a doorway here." Hydrogen shows up in cities too, in miniature. Old cisterns breathe, trapped gases collect, microbes thrive where air and damp stone meet. That's why some voids test warm and thermal even in winter. It isn't a secret lab, it's metabolism. Subtract pipes and cables, human heat, and the leftover warm seams often mark gravity water routes. Those seams explain why some research-only pads and vents land where they do, stable footing above living flow. How do you audit without a backhoe? Context. Layer historic maps, utility plans, and subsidence records. If basements flood in a pattern, a void governs the grade. Replication, GPR at 2 frequencies plus microgravity where permissible, repeat across seasons. Scars, street patches that keep failing on the same grid, vent grates where no modern plan claims a duct, inspection lids orphaned from any mapped line. Those are maintenance affordances that slip their paperwork. A micro story. A shop owner kept replacing tiles over a crack that wandered every spring. We overlaid in 187 water map and a modern GPR slice. The crack tracked an old brick barrel drain. The GPR showed a hollow 3 meters down, half silted, still taking groundwater when storms hit. He cut a relief trench in the alley to intercept the surge. The crack moved once more, then stopped. Missing floor plan found, future saved. Last piece, myths love emptiness. A blank on a plan attracts legend. Void doesn't equal secret, it equals function someone stopped paying to maintain. Muons, GPR, microgravity, they're new ears for old systems. Learn the ergonomics of maintenance. The niche, the notch, the tide line, and the underground stops being a monster and turns back into a manual. 7 vanished metropolises, blank zones that weren't. Okay, now read the places modern maps label open space, reserve, or just leave pale, where the ground politely keeps returning the same hints. Once you see the signatures, you can stand in a suburb and feel a lost metropolis under your shoes. Start with Cahokia, across from St. Louis. People drive past Monk's Mound and think one big hill. Zoom out. You've got earthwork plazas, borrow pits that fed ramparts, causeways that still throw a low crown into stormwater. The plaza wasn't a void, it was hydrology-calibrated flat that collected, spread, and timed surface flow. When cul-de-sacs flood in a ring around a preserved mound, the old drainage is still running the show. A city didn't disappear, the maintenance culture did. Across the Midwest, LIDAR is ruthlessly honest. Township grids sit over palimpsests of embanked octagons and long enclosures, Hopewell and Adena geometries peeking through shelter belts and field lines. Blank parcels stay wet because buried ditches and levees still throttle head. Desk test, map nuisance water complaints against LIDAR. The old civic plan reassembles as puddles and stubborn crowns. West Africa's forest edge reads the same if you stop privileging stone. Later farms smeared older earthwork belts, banks, and moats stitching long defensive chains, documented in several regions including Benin and Nigeria. Soil chemistry shifts, raised paths with ergonomic footprints, widths for 2 loads abreast, widened nodes where traffic paused. Colonial cadasters labeled them bush tracks. After a rain, those paths dry first and wet last. That isn't chance, that's pavement in dirt. Cambodia beyond postcard anchor clinches it. LIDAR didn't just show temples, it exposed hydraulic suburbs, orthogonal ponds beside house mounds, feeder channels graded with absurd finesse, spill links letting whole neighborhoods breathe during monsoon. The blank between towers, that's the city. Modern rice fields that align a little too neatly are riding an old grid that still pays dividends. South Asia hides metropolises under asphalt. Along fossil rivers in the northwest, mound lines map the Gagger-Hakra belts. Under modern roads sit robbed brick courses. Culvert spans repeat ancient modules because engineers subconsciously keep the ratio. Quick trick, measure culvert regularity and cul-de-sac radii. When they cluster on historic brick sizes, you're standing in a supply shadow of a vanished city. Erasure isn't just neglect, it's reuse. Stone and brick walk. A monumental wall turns into 10,000 thresholds. The city stays where its parts went. Look for dressed fragments in farm weirs, standardized bricks in foundations miles from any mapped ruin, lintels reborn as bridges. The drift field outlines urban footprints more honestly than a pin on a heritage list. Audit blank zones with our rule. Context, stack historic aerials, LIDAR, parcel drainage complaints, soil phosphorus maps. Replication, do field ditches, road crowns, and tree lines echo the old orthogonals at repeatable spacings. Scars, hunt maintenance affordances, borrow pits on corners, berm cuts at consistent intervals, brick robbing ramps sized for backs. When those align, call it a city.